Hey y'all, welcome to the Team LoCoFit Roundtable, hosted by me, Laurin and Karina, owner of Team LoCoFit. Each week, I am joined by one of our coaches to dive headfirst into the nutrition, training, mindset, and coaching strategies we use with our clients. If you loved the show, please subscribe, leave us a review, tell a friend, you know the drill. And for more information about coaching, the programs we offer, and additional content, visit teamlocofit.com. All right, y'all, so I am back with Coach Karina. I wish I had a singing voice. I literally
What an
intro. What an intro.
I feel like we need a fan.
And then of course the fridge noise. We're still quarantined, so I am still salty that my fabulous office is
So cool.
literally we did the first podcast there and I was so excited.
And then you're immediately shut down.
So we've been still wanting to get these out though for you guys, so we've been doing them at my house. So if you hear the random kitchen noise every once in a while, that's what it is. But in any case, today's podcast is going to be a little bit different. It's kind of stuff that I don't really like normally talking about, not because I don't like sharing, but because I feel like a lot of times when, and this is maybe just me personally overthinking it, surprise, but when I kind of share personal stuff, I don't want it to ever come across as like fake vulnerability, because I feel like a lot of people use that nowadays, and it's just kind of like not really my style to do that. But I felt like it was important to kind of go over my background because I think a lot of people when listening to this might not know or whatever, and I think it's important because it ties into the main point of the podcast, which is, why we've shifted a lot of our coaching methods and things that I really focus on now, and that we all as Team LoCoFit focus on now, that I never did before, and this is really why. So Karina's gonna do more of like an interview kind of style, I guess. Mm-hmm. So awkward. I'm already I'm sweating. My pits are just dripping right now, guys. Is that the light? Am I nervous? What's going on? We have this light on and it's great. It's super nice.
Fancy.
But they are hot. Did you notice it in the last one?
Yeah,
I was like,
toward the end, I was like,
I know. Or maybe I was like, is it just because I just ate? Is my thermic effect so high right now? Which is something that I definitely deal with too. But anyways, okay.
So I will go ahead and get this thing started. So actually, Laurin kind of came to me with this idea, and I was like, Laurin being you do overthink a lot of things, and I feel like you don't know how helpful these things can be, and I was like, you need to talk about this. So I'm going to expose you, and we're going to get vulnerable. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm just going to ask her a few questions, and basically what we're going to get out of this is kind of having Laurin take a look at her fitness journey in general, and kind of, looking at things that she could possibly share with a lot of you guys, and, looking back at the mistakes she's made, what she would have done differently, what she felt really helped her, excuse me, etc. So to start out, let's start out with the beginning of your fitness journey. How did you kind of start out with fitness in general?
So I started, I don't want to say dieting, but restricting my food at a very young age. And I've talked about this on podcasts before, but for anybody who doesn't know, so basically around 8 or so, I became conscious of food and what was in it, and measuring tapes and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And I'm a normal size person, but growing up I had a lot of petite friends. So when you are a normal size person, you have a lot of petite friends, you just seem bigger, right?
Right.
And this is why it's so funny, when you think back to it, there was definitely girls who were bigger than me, but you only see what you choose to see, right? So I only saw my petite friends, in a friend group, there's always people who have different sizes, different body types, and I was kind of somewhere in the middle, but I always only looked at the end of that spectrum.
Yeah, and looking back, that's so unfair to you, because you're so much taller than the average female.
Karina always uses this example.
You're so tall!
Dude, literally, I'll be like, oh man, I did this. She's like, you're just so tall. And it'll be so
Okay, if you're taller, you need more food to sustain all the extra bone mass and skin mass.
But you've said it
and metabolism.
You've said it in the most inappropriate, you're just so much taller. I'm like, dude, what? First of all, I'm not
I've had 3 extra drinks. It's because you're tall.
I'm not 6'8", but okay. Anyways.
Probably because I'm so short, and I'm like, man, if I was 6 inches taller, I'd eat so much more.
Taller than you.
Yes, you are. You're tall.
Okay. How tall are you?
I'm this is debatable, as we know from my last show.
Yeah. Oh,
somewhere between 5'2" and 5'4". I think 5'3" and a quarter.
We think like around 5'3", but it's always up for debate at the show. Well, I'm 5'7", so not
4 inches. 4 inches? You know what I could do with 4 inches?
If you ask a guy, 4 inches is a lot. All right. Anyway, so back to my childhood and not eating. So there weren't really any like outside influences. Like there was nobody who was like pressuring me to not eat. There was no like my family wasn't like calling me fat. Like I didn't have anything like that. I was not really, still not, but like not tech savvy. Like I wasn't on the internet. Like you know what I mean? Like it wasn't really anything. Literally just like I felt like I was bigger than my friends. And like it didn't start out as like I'm gonna start dieting like crazy, but I just started like, oh, I'm aware of like what's in this, like I'm gonna eat a little bit less. And then like, oh, I'll eat a little bit less, and then that's how that kind of stuff like spirals, you know. And then it goes from like, oh, I ate a little bit less to like, okay, now I'm like doing 500 sit-ups before I leave the house. I'm drinking multiple bottles of water before I have every meal. I'm consciously counting every single calorie inside of the house. I'm looking what everybody else is eating. I'm just running all the time. Like, you know what I mean? Like it spirals really, really quickly, and that obviously took a few years. Yeah. But it got to the point where it was like, oh, like Lauren's actually anorexic.
Yeah, and your parents eventually like saw like, okay, something's not okay. And from what, you know, I've known you a really long time, and I know we've talked about it briefly. Again, you're not someone who likes to be like, woe is me, like listen to my story, but I think it's really helpful. You did at one point, like you sought like therapy, or at least your parents made you.
Wasn't an option, but yeah.
Those are good parents.
Yeah. So things got pretty, you know, like I said in the beginning, it was just kind of like restricting, and you know, but then it got pretty bad.
Yeah. And I've seen photos, like you were.
It wasn't good. And I was like,
it's not healthy.
I was probably like 5'5" or 5'6". Like at that point, I wasn't like fully like my height now, but I was like 90 pounds. Like it was just like not a good look. And I was, you know, like sunken in eyes, like just the whole, and of course that was, you know, once I started finding, you know, gothic clothes, so that really just amplified the look. So, you know, it's like, it was a whole thing, you know, and that's really what set it off. I'm just kidding. But so it got to the point where it was like, okay, like, you know, we need to do something about this. And it was you know, it was anorexia, but, you know, looking back and thinking about it, like, it was also very like OCD, obsessive type things. Like I said, like the sit-ups, and like, I have to run. And so I used to ride horses, and I would literally just like run all the time. And they're like, why? I'm like, oh, I love running. And like, you just convince yourself of stuff. So like, I would just like always go do stuff and whatever. So anyway, so yeah, I started going to an RD. And then I had to, I think part of the whole treatment was like, you have to go see an RD and a therapist. And I honestly really don't remember much from therapy. And I don't know if it was because of my age or because I was like choosing to not remember. And I know a lot of people, you know, like kind of trauma specialists talk about like when there's a lot of trauma, like you just don't remember things, and like you just black out those periods. So it was probably a combination of both, I would say. So I don't really remember, but obviously like it either worked or I said enough things to, you know, kind of get me out of that. And, you know, all this happened before high school, right? So kind of really weird, like middle school years, you're already weird, and then you're like, oh, I'll just slap an eating disorder on this. But and then I got to high school, and all I ever wanted to do was run track, not just because I wanted to run, but I actually enjoyed running. So once I got there, I kind of was like, okay, like I still focused on like healthy eating and whatever. And I was always the kid who was like, you know, had good eating habits. Like I would eat like a chicken breast at, you know, like a track meet instead of like just like Pop-Tarts like other kids, right? Like, so I was actually like eating good food. But I was still like actually eating at that point. Looking back, I still was like, oh my God, like I was not eating enough, which is why I was still pretty thin for a while.
Like you were eating well, but you were still, would you say you were still like overly conscious about what you were eating?
And then it kind of took me a long time. Like I didn't even get like a period until I was almost 16. And so like obviously then, because I basically like stopped it from like happening when I was younger.
And you were so lean.
But anyway, so then, you know, eventually I did gain weight, but I was still like always restricting and running hours a day, and like pretty much year round, because if you did track and cross country, you had preseason, season, and then preseason and season for both of those. And then I was still riding horses, and I was lifting weights and going to spinning class. So I was still, I wouldn't say that in high school it wasn't like as disordered, but I was still doing like a ton. So but it was stuff that I really enjoyed, and it was a cool competitive outlet. So then when I found bodybuilding, and I was like, oh, I'll do this, because I went to my first bodybuilding show, right out of high school, and it was like, oh, this seems pretty cool. And then everybody was like, pump the brakes.
Yeah.
You're gonna like just, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I remember you telling me, like, when you got into physique sports and you got into competing, your parents were like, whoa, like, this kind of looks like, you going down this specific path.
Yeah.
And
friends, I mean, everybody was kind of on that same boat as like, hey, like, what are you doing? And I'm like, listen, it's different. And at that time, like, for my first show, I was 19, and I dieted, but it was like nothing like.
But in the off season, you actually had to eat enough.
Yes.
And that's kind of like where that
was where that difference was. Like, hey, like, look, like, I'm eating and I'm still like fueling. This is like a sport, and it's not just like dieting because I hate myself and whatever. So the intentions started out like totally, I would say, pure intentions. Like, I wasn't using my first bodybuilding show to cope with an eating disorder that wasn't like fully addressed, and a lot of people do that, unfortunately.
Definitely.
I would definitely say that was not my position. Like, I was in a better place. I was still hyper conscious of what I was eating and training and looking like, of course.
I think any physique athlete is.
Exactly.
Like,
so
that's just like a byproduct of getting into bodybuilding. Like, your first prep, like, you're never gonna look at your body or food the same, but it doesn't have to ruin your life forever. Yeah,
and it really, like, so I did my first show. I saw my first show when I was 18, and then I like just kind of trained that year, and then like I dieted for a show, like like 8 weeks. I was doing like 2-day cardio. I was doing all this stuff, but like it was like 8 weeks. Not a big deal. And then I was like, whoa, I like this, but I'm gonna need like a lot more muscle. So I basically took 2 years off, and I was in undergrad, so like school was busy, like life was busy. I was still like a meathead for all intents and purposes, but I wasn't really dieting, and like whatever. Like, now I was still, again, hyper conscious and didn't know a lot of stuff. Like, oh my god, it was so dumb, the shit I used to do, like so bad. But that's part of like learning, right?
Yeah.
But it was never like a super disordered kind of a thing.
You did it more out of like the love for the sport back then.
Yeah. And then I started picking back up with competing in 2013. And then there were some breaks, but I really didn't stop until the end of 2018.
Right. And how many shows have you done in total?
I think like 22.
22
So besides
shows.
the first one, I'd done over 20 shows like in that period.
Wow.
And that was with a full year off because of an injury also. So
I remember that.
Which was still like a disaster. But so basically I started competing again, and while I was still not as competitive, I was starting to become more competitive. And then because of becoming more competitive and doing more shows, you start putting yourself in a metabolic and a mental position to where it's just very different. And I fell into the trap of, I'm competing as a way to regulate my diet. I am a competitor. I only do this for the shows. And then basically when it was off time, it was off time.
Right. Like it was all or nothing.
Yes.
Almost. So quick question, because I think that like this part is super important to highlight. And this podcast is kind of you taking a look back on your journey and seeing things that you would have done differently. So those 2 years of you competing that frequent, do you think that...
What 2 years? The first 2 years back?
Yes.
Okay.
No, the most recent 2 years, where you did essentially 22 shows in that time?
No, that was in that 5 years.
Oh, okay, so... But 22 years, or 22 shows in 5 years. Here we go again with the brain. Do you think that you may have competed too much? Would you, looking back now, would you have maybe done yourself better now if you competed a little less and took more time in between?
Oh, for sure. So when I started again in 2013, I did a few shows in the summer, and had a pretty decent run, qualified for nationals. I ended up doing nationals as a figure competitor in 2013. So that's the end of the year. Anybody who doesn't know. So I basically started prepping probably, if I had to guess, March 2018. Did some shows in the summer. Took a little bit of time off. Dieted again. did that was like 2013. 2014 came around, same thing. So I have a few months off, start dieting again. And I dieted all year, and that was the year that I actually turned pro. So I didn't really start to have any issues until like after USA's. So pretty much I had dieted most of 2013, only took a little bit of time off, had to peel the weight back off again, because I was now doing bikini. So I was like, oh, I don't need to add any muscle because I'm not doing figure anymore, right?
Right.
So I did a bunch of shows in a row, really had to, hammer it harder because 2013 was easy, but 2014 isn't, right?
Right.
So, and then I had, I got third at USA's, which for that show was like top 2 for your pro card. So I decided that I wanted to do nationals at the end of the year because I was pretty close. I wanted to give it another run. So like anybody, kind of falls into this, like ate a little bit too much after the show. Not anything crazy, but, put some weight on pretty quickly. Was like, oh, this has never happened before. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That was that kind of first wake up call. And then I was like, well, I better peel this off for nationals. And then that was even harder.
Right.
Obviously, it didn't end up working out. I won the overall nationals in 2014. So I wouldn't change that. But then what I would change was that I said, oh, I'm going to compete 2015. Because, you got to be relevant. I just won my pro card. Yeah. This huge show. I got to compete next year. So what did I do? End of November. So basically, nationals hits right when Thanksgiving starts. So basically, you have a few days of post-show treats, then you have Thanksgiving, and then you're like, oh, it's already basically Christmas,
Yeah.
And then, you look up in January and you're like, shit, what am I going to do? Like, I was going to prep this year. And I had said I want to do the Tampa Pro for whatever fucking reason. I was hell-bent on doing that show, which is in August. So now as a coach, I'm looking back and going, oh my God, like this is so stupid. Yeah. Like, but again, like it's not like it wasn't anybody's fault besides mine. I said I want to do this. I want to be relevant. I want to do these shows. Thinking that this was the most important thing. Yeah. So hindsight, looking back, and that's why I'm so adamant, and we're so adamant as a team about being strategic with the shows, because I'm not gonna, if somebody's really close, I'm gonna push them like I pushed myself for nationals, right? That 2014. I could have not done that. But I don't regret doing that. I regret the next year.
Yeah, I think that was for the right reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But your willingness to push again just to be relevant was, probably not worth the reward or the price in the end.
Oh my God, it was so bad. That was, my pro debut was the worst show I've ever done to date. It was, my first show was better than that one. Like, it was bad.
Is that the one where you prepped yourself, kind of?
Which one? My pro debut?
Yeah.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm getting our timeline confused.
Yeah, there's so many shows, but it was just really bad, like really bad. And the rest of the season got a little bit better, but and then I thought, you would have thought, oh, just fucking
call it.
No, I'm gonna compete all of 2016 also. So each year got worse and worse and worse, and then I competed all through the end of 2016, all the way through December, and that's actually when I hurt my glute, hip, whatever, still unknown. Was in 2016. So I was basically forced to take off 2017 because I could barely walk or sleep, let alone train, you know what I mean? But that was, and then that was a super low point. Like now I've had all these years of prepping.
Right.
And then now you're like, oh shit. And then that was kind of coinciding with like, I had just finished grad school. So now I'm like, had like kind of a weird, like I'm not an athlete and I'm not a student anymore. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on that year in 2017.
Yeah. So a lot of things that you identified with, you essentially couldn't participate in anymore. So it was, kind of like this, not feeling lost, but like, okay, what now?
Yeah. And then that's, a lot of people, and that's, what would you do differently? Now I can see that with clients, and I'm very proactive, or try to be very proactive when I start to see things like that happen with somebody, when they start to identify only with, and we don't really get a lot of clients like that, to be super honest. Like, I have to say, like, whether, I don't know why, we just don't, or the type of people that we attract aren't really usually like that. But even if somebody's kind of getting caught up like that, it's, I really try and address it right away. And I try and make people do things outside of this too, because I think it's so important.
Oh yeah.
Because when the only thing that you have is your clear heels and a bikini, and again, not even with clients, but other people, I've seen it like literally destroy them, like ruin their relationships, ruin their relationship with food, like ruin their body, like it's so sad. And like
I've seen marriages end.
Yeah, like literally their relationships are over it.
Yeah.
And it's understandable. Like you think back to like how you act when you're prepping and, you know, you're really lean, you're really tired and your food's all tracked and you're just all, you know, crazy. And that's part of it, you know, but if you do that over and over and over again for years and years and years, like that's not fair to the other person.
If that's your priority, especially if you're a married person with family, if you put this as your priority and, you know, like say one day you like terminally don't have a leg for whatever reason, you like can't compete or you can't train as hard as you were, like what do you have then? And so that's something that like I think we do very well as a team is like we emphasize the importance of just being a well-rounded athlete, person and athlete, like outside of the gym. I have a client who is a student athlete, and one thing I always tell her is like, I don't care, you know, whether or not you're adherent with your training, like you get all your schoolwork done first. Like that should come first. So like the fact that, you know, people should bank everything on a sport like bodybuilding where very few people, you know, get paid the big bucks for it.
And big silly. Bucks is not even, I mean,
it's not even that big.
The people who are winning the shows, I mean, it's not that much. You know what I mean? Like it's no, and outside of that, like, you know, maybe that's exactly what they want to do and that's totally fine, right? But we're just saying there's only a very small handful of people who are going to be able to live off of their show winnings and their sponsorships. Very small.
So, okay, going back to your injury and finishing, you know, school, so kind of what did that year off look like with you being forced to take off physically, mentally? Yeah,
well, I mean, there was a lot of perks. You know, I got to obviously throw myself into the business and really trying to build that. And that was a really good year for the business. And I finally got to say like, hey, I'm going to travel, not for me, but for the business. And I'm going to do all these things. And it's not just going to be about me. And that was like a big turning point. Like the year before, it had been, so I started coaching in 2013. And it was, you know, it was really small, and I kept it small all through school for a reason, you know what I mean? And, you know, when I was in school, like I wasn't going to my clients' shows or events or going to speak. I wasn't doing that. And I actually did speak a few times, but you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like the main thing. That was like a big deal. A smaller volume.
Like right now, you know, obviously when it's not coronavirus time, I see you maybe like a quarter of the year because you're always traveling.
And that is, you know, something that kind of came out of 2017 was like, well, I'm not doing this athlete thing right now, and I'm not doing the school thing, and you know, so what am I going to do? I'm going to focus on this business. I'm going to grow it. And there always felt like this pull, like, you know, well, maybe I should compete again. Like maybe I should do this and whatever. And you know, because it was always what was so comfortable to do, and it's what I did for so long. And you know, literally, once you've competed, until you've been removed for enough time, people never stop asking you, when's your next show? What are you prepping? What are you going to do? Like, that's what everybody asks, right? So I just kind of was like, oh, I need to do this again, you know what I mean? And it's going to help the business. They're going to help all this stuff, right? And I did genuinely want to do it also, but I had all these other kind of thoughts in my head. So 2017, you know, rough year, but get through it. And then, you know, I started prepping at the end of 2017 for my 2018 season, which was the longest prep I'd ever done. Best I ever looked. Did 5 shows, got shredded, stayed, you know, too lean for too long. But again, that was my choice. Like nobody's pushing me to do this. It was, and at this point, I very much realized like I'm, you know, was not winning shows. So this was just purely a like, I want to do this. And then, you know, after that, you know, I really like, people always say this, like, oh, empty the tank. Like, I emptied every ounce of, I want to do this. You know what I mean? Like,
even now, I ask you every once in a while just to see where you're at. Like, when do you think you'll prep again? And you're like, meh.
Like I emptied the tank, and and then I got, you know, smacked in the face again with all these dieting adaptations. You know,
right?
Because not only had I dieted for 9 months, I had all those other years of the dieting. So it wasn't just my, you know, my competition prep years, it was my childhood too. Like, so
all of that had a compounding effect.
All of it.
A lot longer for you to recover from than the average person who didn't, you know, do 5 years in a row of prepping.
You know, and people don't, a lot of clients will forget about that. And I'm like, yeah, well, when's the first time you started dieting? I'm like, oh, I was like 13. Okay. Well, how old are you? 30? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, it's not like it just goes away. So these kinds of things compound. So after 2018, I was like, I was just done. I was so done on so many levels.
Yeah.
And you know, I was like, you know what, I'm good. Like, I don't really need to do this. But I didn't really like think of it as like kind of like a finite thing. I was like, I'm just done right now. Like, I don't want to think about tracking, don't want to look at food, don't just want to do whatever the fuck I want, whenever I want. That was when brought on Jill as the first coach, beginning of 2019, brought you on as second coach. You know, so we started, I was like, okay, back to business focus. Like, that's what I did last year. Like, that worked out really well. I've decided I'm not going back to school. I'm done with the competing for right now. Back to building the business and actually growing the business, which was what I hadn't been able to do for so many years because I was getting in my own way and just too busy. So finally, you know, bringing you guys on, eventually bringing Laurin on. This is all like in 2019. And, you know, pretty much just going around and like training, eating, traveling. And, you know, again, in the beginning of all that, all you hear is, oh, when are you prepping again? Hey, when are you gonna do this again?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you know, I don't, and I hate when people are like, I'm retiring. And then they come back like, I'm not saying I'm retiring, right? Like,
I mean, this could change.
Exactly.
Right? I think.
But I've changed my outlook of it.
Yeah.
And I'm now no longer tied to, I feel like I have to do this.
Yeah. And I think that you really can't see all of kind of the, I guess, negative and disruptive habits that all of those years of dieting has created. Not that like dieting makes you do bad things, but just kind of you probably overdoing it and maybe not resting when you should have. Now that you've not dieted since 2018, we are now approaching mid 2020. You can likely say that like it's much easier for you to see like now how much better you are mentally and physically, that you're in a healthy like body comp, mental space and all that.
It's night and day, and I think that's actually why I don't want to go back to that, to be super honest. I think I've done it like enough, you know what I mean? Like when people are like, oh, I paid my dues, I fucking paid my dues, you know what I mean? Like I enjoyed the shit out of it when I did it. Obviously there was a lot of ups and downs, but it made me a better coach. But for a while I felt like I had to compete in order to be looked at as a good coach, in order to be looked at as this person who like knew what I was talking about. And now I think of that and I'm like, that's so not true at all, you know what I mean? And now, of course, not saying that I wouldn't be a better coach if I go through it again. Like I learned something that I go through that every time. So I'm not saying that I won't do it or that it's stupid if people are competing and coaching people, not at all. I'm just saying for me personally,
that's what your point of view was at that time. Which is what drove you to do it. Now, being in the position that you are in right now, you're looking back and saying, not necessary. Not necessary. But it was obviously a good lesson for you.
Oh, there were so many lessons.
Now you can see with a lot of your current clients, like, whoa, we need to pump the brakes. Like, if you don't do this, you're going to end up like me. And obviously there was a lot of things that, you know, you had an injury probably from dieting too long. Like, you know, taking a longer time to recover from those compounded years of dieting. But
hormonally, I mean, things were so depressed for so long. Or suppressed, not depressed, but so suppressed. And, you know, that, and just even like looking, one of my clients sent me a picture of us a few years ago. And I was like, oh my God, I look even old. I look so much older than I do now. And it was like 5 years ago or whatever, a few years ago. And I was just like, holy shit. Like, you know, you don't really realize like how not only unhealthy my body was for all of that, because it's not just the dieting, it's like the up and down, you know? And basically what I had to go through was, you know, what I confronted at the not even really the end of 2018, because I kind of was just like, I'm taking an off season, I'm just gonna do whatever. You know, 2019 rolled around and I was like, oh, should I compete this year, you know? And then I was like, you know, because that's what I thought I was gonna do. Like, oh, I'll take off a few months and I'll compete again. And then I was like, what am I doing? Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this is what I keep doing to myself. You know what I mean? I keep fucking doing the same thing over and over again. I'm never getting better and I'm never actually fixing any of the issues. So I was like, you know what? This year I'm just going to eat and train. And that was like my goal. I'm going to eat and I'm going to train. 2019, not this year, last year, that was my goal. So what I do, eat, train. And, you know, some training weeks are great, some aren't. Some weeks my diet's like super bodybuilding on point. Some weeks I'm traveling and I'm enjoying more food. And I really had to go through this period, and I don't like labeling things, and it's so funny, but, you know, like, I was like, I'm just going to eat. I'm not tracking. I'm going to eat food. I'm going to go through all of the really, really ugly, like, overeating, undereating, hating myself, guilt, this whole mental fuck that we all go through. I'm actually going to fully embrace this. Yeah. Which is really, really hard, which is why a lot of people don't get out of it, because they don't want to confront what's actually going on.
And when they get so uncomfortable, they revert back to what they're familiar with. Yeah. Dieting, and where they're comfortable.
Yep. And that's the default. That's like the easy button. The easy button is I'm going to go back to tracking my food and dieting because I feel like I'm fully in control.
That's the issue with yo-yo dieting, and especially for females who, we get a lot of questionnaires, and one big question on there is, when's the last time you dieted? And sometimes a lot of women will say, oh, I feel like I've been dieting forever.
My whole life.
Because they'll revert to that, I've never allowed myself to eat more or intentionally try to feed my body more. And because that's scary and uncomfortable, they automatically revert to, okay, time to diet, time to do a ton of cardio, time to restrict. And then, you know, you never get into this normal place or like a good place in your relationship with food, because people are always reverting to dieting, restricting, etc.
And that's what I kept doing, you know, for years. And part of that was, and again, this is not a competition-induced thing. This is just something that happened from a combination of my circumstances, my environment, my drive, my history, like all these things kind of together. We do see it happen a lot, just because I think that physique competitions attract a lot of the same people, obviously. Like, there's only a certain amount of people who want to do that kind of stuff, and it attracts a lot of people with the same background. So we see this kind of pattern over and over again, particularly with females, and that's who we mainly coach. We do coach males too. Hey guys, if anybody's listening, we do coach males. I know, we do love our guy client. We always get that question. I'm like, yeah, of course, we love coaching. We love coaching guys. Come on, bro.
This one's for our bros.
But I think, you know, finally in 2019, I said, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm actually just going to eat
your body
and train.
Needs. Yeah.
And, you know, I would say that I gained probably most of my weight initially. Yeah. And then I've kind of fluctuated within the same-ish weight for a long time. I don't really weigh myself super frequently anymore. But I just do just to kind of like check in. But it's pretty much been almost the same. Yeah. Since like that kind of initial first few months of gaining.
So your body's kind of at its quote unquote set point.
Yeah, it's where it's stable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people really try and fight this point. Right. Which is, and we've done different podcasts on that, like body set point and settling point and all those kinds of things. And for, you know, this is definitely, and I talked about this on somewhere, I can't remember where. If I wanted to maintain a little bit leaner, I could, right? I could work it down. And realistically, like, it would probably take like a year. If I really wanted to maintain a leaner body comp, it would take me a little bit of time to get really, really consistent with my diet down, reverse back up, diet down again, and try and maintain that. Like, that would probably take about a year if I wanted to be slightly leaner. But in order to get really lean, that's just not how it works. You know what I mean? That is a whole different kind of thing. And I'm finally in a place where I'm like, this is my body. Like, it's okay. You know what I mean? And I am in a place where I can train, I recover, hormones are normal.
You can do jujitsu for 3 to 4 hours and feel good.
I would certainly not be able to do that.
Get your butt whipped.
And
I think that's cultivated like a lot of good things, and that's something that's added to your life. And because you didn't revert to dieting, like, would you have been able to find jujitsu in something that you love now? And
probably not, honestly.
Coach this also demographic. I know we've been getting a lot of like jujitsu girls who are like, oh, someone gets it. Yeah, so that's really exciting, and like that's definitely something that's come out of that for sure.
When I started that, I was like, oh, I just want to start jiu-jitsu, but it's really become like a big part of my life, and 100% like if like I look at myself like in the physique world, I'm like, oh, I'm so big, and if I like say something like that, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And they're like, actually, like, you're like a really good size for this, you know what I mean? Like, my height, Hey, they've been taking notes from you.
You're tall.
I'm tall.
But you're also muscular. I feel like you don't
Yes.
like
So
give yourself enough credit there.
I'm, muscular. They call me strong. I'm like, oh, you guys are so nice. So I'm definitely stronger than like a random chick who decides to do jiu-jitsu. But yeah, I'm not like, so I have no technique though, so there's that. But
we'll get there.
we're working on it. Coronavirus really fucking ruined my groove. I was in an awesome groove, and then like now I'm like, how do I spell arm lock? But anyways, so I have a certain height, and for my height and my weight and my density, like if I was too lean, it would be really, really hard. So like Karina said, I typically try and go several times a week, depending on traveling, but like 2 to 4 times a week, and I'm in there for a few hours like each time, and it beats you up. Like it's a very hard sport on your body.
Yeah, there's no way you could perform for that long and at the rate that you do if you were dieting. And I feel like
now if I've been doing jiu-jitsu for a few years, it's like anything, right? If that's like your norm, then you're like, oh, okay, I can kind of adapt to it. But right now I'm honestly like really enjoying that, and that's kind of what I've been focusing on, is more of like performance, and just
which is super important to focus on coming out of a diet, because like it should no longer be, I think the over focus on aesthetics is what drives people to diet. But you could really change your aesthetic if you train hard too.
Oh yeah, that's where all like the magic air quotes happens, right? It's like
true
building muscle. But the whole reason, again, to share all this, and without sounding like I'm trying to overshare and just talk about myself, the whole reason why this is all important is because I've gone through all these experiences, and there's things like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that. But then at the same time, like I learned so much now to help clients, because I've put myself in those situations for
and to help your
years.
Coaches too.
Yes, and to help you guys.
Yeah, a lot of things that I've taken note from you on that I haven't experienced specifically, but you have, and I think that all of the coaches are like that. We've all experienced something very different to create this balance in a team, and being able to coach a lot of different people.
Yeah, and that's why we're so passionate about certain things. So like, when we first started talking about the like, hey, maybe like macro tracking isn't like what we should be doing 24/7, right? And I started having these thoughts, and I was like,
absolutely.
It kind of was like, I know this sounds nuts to people who maybe aren't in this, but in our world, as far as an online coach who uses science, again, air quotes, science-based coach who, gives clients macros, it was not even questioned for years that would be a bad thing.
Right.
And I even did a research project on this, talking about how that's a flexible diet. Tracking macros is a flexible diet. Like, look how much better this is than a meal plan, which was not the results of our study, but hypothetically, like, back when I did that was like the whole premise, like, oh, if it's your macros just trumps, meal plans, right? They're so much better. And then I had this epiphany a few years later, which thankfully, because now we're trying to actually publish it and actually have that in there. I was like, flexible dieting or if it's your macros, isn't really a flexible diet. And I completely read all of that background research wrong. I completely looked at dietary restraint models completely wrong. And I'm actually probably hurting my clients, because I started realizing if I said to them like, hey, go have a dinner, like they would tell me like, oh, I have this going on, right? Like I have a celebration, like, somebody's birthday, or I graduated or whatever, right? And I'd say, oh, just go have that meal, because that seems like the normal thing to do, right? Like, hey, just don't track that meal. And then I was having all these people have all these issues. And I was like, like, oh, I don't know what's in it, so I couldn't eat it. Or, oh, I didn't know what was in it, so then I just started binging for 2 days. You're like, wait, what? And then I was like, holy shit, like, revelation, like, am I doing all this harm to my clients? And so I started thinking all these things, and at the same time, I saw Eric Helm start talking about it a lot more. And he was like, I'm getting a lot of backlash in the diet, the bodybuilding community, talking about this, and, how we basically don't need to track 24/7. And I was like, man, like, I've been thinking these things too, like, this is crazy. And the whole reason why we care so much about this as a team is not because I give two shits about somebody going and having a celebratory meal. I care about somebody having a good relationship with food and a good mental outlook of themselves, and enough confidence and trust in themselves that they can go out and actually be flexible with their plan, enjoy themselves, and get back on it and still make progress.
Yeah, because where we start to see the detriment is when like counting macros starts to take away from your life. Like people won't go out on dates because they
How do I track macros on a date? I'm a single girl. What? What do you mean?
Girl, you need it. Anyways, but yeah, or they'll not like go out for celebratory meals, or they'll just sit there with their Tupperware, or they won't eat at all, and they're not even. It's people, like, here's the issue. It's like when you're not prepping.
Exactly. It's not like a super stringent goal is a few weeks out, like in your face.
Yeah.
Hey, if you're trying to make weight for an event or you're getting on stage, eat out of your fucking Tupperware.
Yeah.
But if you're not, you don't need to be doing that. And the whole reason, this is where I think the biggest issue comes from, is people hear, oh, untracked? Oh, okay, so I should go have a burger and fries and a milkshake and then go home and have 6 sheets of cookies. No. That's not what I said.
Yeah. No.
And I get that sometimes, because I've been there, a lot of clients have been there, you have to go through that period in order to understand that. You have to say, oh, somebody said untracked meal? Oh, okay, game on, I'm gonna eat everything.
And then you learn, like, okay, that was too much.
Oh, that was too much.
But I think that, that issue comes from not having the practice of not relying on a macronutrient target. And if you never practice that, and if you don't fail the first few times, you'll never get to this point in life where you can go and have an untracked deal and go untracked meal and then go out on a date night or whatever, and not allow, tracking macros to start taking away from your overall quality of life.
Yeah. And I think people hear this and they go, well, I don't need to do that. Well, you do if you're having all these issues.
Yeah.
And again, the problem isn't tracking. The problem isn't meal planning. The problem isn't structure. We need all that. But the problem is when somebody adds in a little bit of flexibility and then you can't handle it and then it becomes a pathological issue. That's what we need to address. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've had many clients over the years who have had to, hey, you need to go to therapy for this. Hey, you need to go to an eating disorder clinic for this. Hey, you need to, and not most people don't fall into that category, but some people do.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know what I mean? And honestly, like, it's just going to expedite the process. And I would say that it took me, I can confidently say, 18 months to go like, you know what, like, I feel pretty good around food. Like, I, take it or leave it. Obviously, clearly, I love food. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the thing. You know what I mean? Like, hey, we all know I love my food. But there's a huge difference, and I can actually moderate myself, and I have no problem whatsoever going out and being like, you know what, I'm just gonna order like kind of like a light dinner. I want to have a few more drinks. Like, I'm not like, oh, I gotta have all the drinks and the apps and the dinner and dessert and go home and eat some more.
Yeah.
No, like, hey, I'm gonna moderate myself, but it's like, you know what, if I want to have a more indulgent meal, guess what, I'm gonna eat a little bit less earlier.
Yeah, and then you figure out how to balance all of that, and then you become, quote unquote, like, more advanced. The way I see tracking, and I've said this a trillion times, is like, tracking is a tool, and you track so often that when you go into an untracked meal, like, you generally have an idea of like how many protein, fats, carbs something has. And
when people say, oh, I don't know what was in that, put on your thinking cap.
Yeah,
you do.
Yeah, and
you
like,
know roughly what's in it.
You
order a pasta meal, guess what, there's butter and oil and some cheese. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, what's the surprise meal made of? No, like, you know what's in it.
Yeah. And
you can make the decision to order, hey, I'm going to order this pasta meal and I'm going to make sure that I have enough protein and I'm going to have half of that.
Yeah.
And I'm full, I'm good.
Side salad.
Or, hey, I'm going to order something that's a little bit, cleaner, air quotes, easier to track, and I'm going to have a glass or two of wine. It's all about the choice.
Yeah.
And you can't get there easily. And I hate to say it.
Make those choices if you aren't pushed to. Like, I feel like tracking macros is a way to have that choice made for you. But now when those rails are off, now it's up to you, right? How far are you going to let yourself go? And I think that, you've shared that with me too, and I feel like I've had a lot of clients who struggled with this as well, and I'm someone who's definitely struggled with it as well. Like, taking those rails off at first, I wasn't making the right decisions because I wasn't practicing the right decisions, but we just kept going and we went over and over again, and I had the first 2 weeks post show not tracking. The first week was kind of ugly. Like I went really hard, and then the second week I was like, all right, like I have this under my belt, like I'm gonna do a better job this week. And I haven't tracked in a while, just like you. And
but you know, there were definitely points there. It wasn't just like easy peasy. Like now you're in a good spot, but there was definitely weeks where you're like, hey, I kind of overdid this week. I kind of want to diet this week. Hey, I want to do this. And those are all normal things. And then that was where I have to put my foot down and say, hey, like, no, like these were your goals. This is what you told me, and this is what I'm going to hold you accountable to. And there's been many clients over the years that I've pushed away because I'm very strong about that. But it's ultimately because I give a shit. And I'm not going to press everybody's easy button and say, oh, this is hard for you? Okay, we're just going to ignore it. And any coach can give somebody macros and tell them to go do cardio. But that's not what people hire us for, and that's not what I want them to hire us for. I want us to actually make them better and work through the things they struggle with. It's so funny when clients are like, oh, sorry, life's just really hard right now. You know, I feel bad, you know, with coaching. I'm like, this is actually when you need a coach. Like, this is when I'm of much more use, when we can actually work through these things and like, hey, you're struggling here, like why don't we find a solution? And like that's actually the most exciting part as a coach, is to actually change somebody's life and change their whole outlook. Because again, it's a lot different, like, hey, what are we going to do for, you know, these few months? But it's like, hey, you know, what can you do in a few years, and what can you do in 10 years, right? So I think that it's something that is, it's so hard to explain to people, especially when they're on the other side of it, right? Like if you had told me at the end of 2018, like, hey, like, you know, you'd have kind of like normal hunger signals and you'd feel okay around food, I was like, yeah, you're fucking crazy. Like, no, you're not. No, I wouldn't. But it just takes, you know, in my example, it took about a year for me to be like, okay, like I'm pretty good. And then I would say about another 6 months to be like, wow, okay, I'm in like a much better spot. And, you know, to really be like thriving, again, with our air quotes for anybody who can't watch, like that, we'll use that term loosely, but just thriving over here. But you know what I mean? Like it was just like a year, like, you know, last September I was like, okay, I feel way better. And then, you know, I would say about like March this year, I was like, okay, like this is the most normal that I felt and really ever, like in 20 years. You know
now that you're like where you are health wise and really healthy, like you can look back with a clear mind and say, I'm not going to make that mistake again. Like I'm going to allow my body to recover.
And that's why it's important to have people as part of that journey. You know, whether it's a coach, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member, significant other. It's kind of hard for people who are really close to be objective with you. Obviously there's certain people who can be. But I know, like, for example, like, you know, I'm not going to talk about this shit with Ryan. No. First of all, guys don't understand. Just letting you guys know, guys don't understand this stuff. So girlfriends trying to explain it. They're just like, if you don't want to eat more, why are you? You're like, shut the fuck up. You good? You know, like, you're like, you're like, oh wow, fucking just dropping knowledge bombs over here. I never thought about that one. So, you know, it's definitely hard to open up to a significant other, whether they understand or not. It's just kind of like a weird thing. And then, you know, family and friends can sometimes be objective, but a lot of times they can't be, you know, so sometimes it's helpful to have somebody else who's just kind of more outside the picture. You know, whether it's like a coach or a therapist or both. And, or, you know, maybe just struggle a little bit on your own. But, you know, I think it's important to have people as part of this journey and to have that accountability, because it's if you don't have the accountability, it's really easy for anybody to just go back, like I said, to like kind of like their easy button. Like, hey, I'm struggling. This is like, that's actually when those breakthroughs happen. When you say like, no, like we're putting our foot down and we're really going to focus on this.
And that's super important. Like if you ever want to create long lasting change, and that's something I say to my clients all the time, physique wise, like if you really want to look different in the future, if you really want to change your body, or, you know, next time you diet, like truly unveil a different physique, we're going to have to spend time doing something totally different and not reverting to what we've always been doing. Okay, so I guess to wrap things up, I think that was really awesome. I think you did a really good job of kind of explaining, you know, your whole life journey here and kind of highlighting the things that you would have done differently. And I think we can both say that those have paid off, even though that they sucked, but they paid off now for you. And I think, you know, I don't know, things happened for a reason maybe, but like though you're using those things for good now to help other people. So that's really exciting. And that's, I think, a big reason why I'm so excited to be part of Team LoCoFit, because this is something we feel so strongly about, is, you know, not just taking people's money and making them lose weight, but changing their life beyond the stage, beyond, you know, a fat loss transformation, etc. So, do you have anything else you want to say?
All this feels, I'm just smiling from ear to ear.
I know this was a hard podcast for you because you don't like being vulnerable, and I pushed you to do this, but you know.
Hey, I gotta take my own advice. Gotta push yourself past the point of discomfort. Whatever we just said. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate it. And yeah, like Karina said, this was not a normal or easy podcast to share, but I hope that it was insightful, which is always the goal with whatever we're sharing. So if you guys have not already subscribed, we would really, really appreciate that. Leave a review, 10 stars, you know, the whole deal. And for any other information about other podcasts that we've done, articles, programs, or to apply for coaching, you can visit teamlocofit.com. And if you have any other questions, you can just let us know. There's also a contact button to, you know, hit a little email there. So thank you guys for sticking around. This was a little bit of a longer one. We really appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.